Today, my guest is Tina Erwin. This is episode 93. And Tina and I recorded this late last summer or maybe in the fall for my Patreon community. But I thought that it was so compelling and interesting. Some of the information I think might be really important for some of you listeners. She is a retired naval officer who has the ability to see the dead, people who don't realize they're dead and who need help crossing over. Now, it sounds fantastical, but the stories that she tells are very compelling, and I hope you'll enjoy this episode. Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I chat about stories and creativity in all different styles and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and my goal is to promote what Dale Carnegie stated in his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. It's my firm belief that the goal of most creative people is to try to understand themselves and others. That's what makes artwork of all kinds so compelling. But more than that, the personal stories of my guests promote understanding as well. Roger C. Schenck, a cognitive scientist, said, human beings are not ideally set up to understand logic. They are ideally set up to understand stories. It's my hope that Story Power will help us understand each other better by sharing the stories of my guests. Tina Erwin, I'm so happy to have you here today. Talking about all of the interesting things that you do. So, do you want to tell the listeners what it is you do?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here. And what I do is I help people on other levels. And I my mission is to teach the living to help the dead. And that includes, the things that a lot of people say they don't believe in, which are ghosts. But people have been experiencing ghostly phenomenon since recorded and pre-recorded time. And it's been around for so long that millions and millions and millions of people are not imagining what they're feeling. And one of my trademarks, actually own the trademark, is teaching the physics of metaphysics. And metaphysics means beyond the physics that you think you know. And a lot of things that, we don't think we know actually have already been discovered in our, current physics. Well, one of the primary laws is that energy is neither created nor destroyed. So the energy that animates a mortal body has to go somewhere after the mortal frame disintegrates or collapses or shuts down.
Right.
It's like someone turning out the lights in a building. When you understand the dying process and then what happens, there's a separation and the soul lives forever. It's what Christ talked about when he discussed life ever after. Not death everlasting, but life everlasting. And that feeling that there's so many things that happen to people at death. There's so much fear and confusion. And what I'm trying to do is remove the fear and confusion, take the concept of psychic ability to a slightly different level, and make it far more about service than being spooky or scared or feeling like you have a superpower. It's really what can we do to help others is the most important thing.
Yeah, I love that. I like the service idea of it. Yeah.
Because I'm not flipping cards or telling fortunes. I just want to help the person in front of me or their loved one.
Right. Yes. So do you think that some people have when their physical body dies, they have a hard time going to the next level?
Well, they don't really have a choice. It's a physics issue.
Yeah.
Once the body shuts down and the vital heat leaves the body, and the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, because I want your listeners, I'm grateful that you have wonderful listeners, to not just believe me. I think anyone who with psychic ability deserves to be questioned. And a lot of this information comes from the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche. And they describe the exact process of death, which they have studied for God knows how many tens of thousands of years. And it's the same for every single person on earth, whether you die a long death or an instantaneous death. This process is the same. And they talk about what happens to the soul afterward. But having done years and years and years and years of research into what happens after death to take the fear away from it, once the vital heat leaves the body and the the soul begins the separation process, and there's a Russian scientist who created something called Carillion photography.
Oh, yeah.
There are Carillion photographs of a person at the moment of death, and you can see the soul leave. It's so remarkable. It's this wispy feeling. And when the person leaves their body, they can travel with the speed of thought, which is why relatives in different parts of the country will say, I could feel my mother die, or I knew she was standing next to me, or I got a sense of her. And someone will say, well, I felt that, but I'm in Oklahoma, and you're in California or New York or whatever. How can that's not possible. But if you're not encumbered by a mortal body, of course it's possible. When you're thinking about someone, you can think about someone in 10 different states or 100 different countries. And those thoughts can go because they're not encumbered by time and space.
Right.
That's what the ether is. So is this making any sense?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay.
I mean, I think that I haven't read the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying or Life and Death, but it goes along with everything that I have studied or have felt. It's just, I'm not. You term it as the living helping the dying, but maybe it's the dying helping the living. That's the kind of the way I look at it. The dying help the living, because I had this experience when I was in college, and I was going through a really difficult time, and I decided to start journaling. Someone suggested it to me, and then meditating. And my grandfather, who died when I was 9, would come to me during my meditations. And he was, he didn't really, I don't know if he was my guide or what he was, but, it was just comforting to have him there and to say, it's going to be okay. That's basically all he said was, it's all going to be okay. It's all going to work out. And having him there for that, however long I had him, it was maybe a couple of years, that was so comforting.
It can be, but if your child dies, then your child isn't going to be comforting you because your child has no idea what to do at death. And I have a couple of skill sets. One of them is remote viewing. And my oldest son called me many months ago, and their 11-month-old was screaming a scream they'd never heard before.
Oh.
And they couldn't get him to go to sleep. And normally he just goes right down. Everything was normal. It was changed, and he'd eaten, and everything was perfect. But he's looking at something and he's screaming. So my son says, can you take a look? I said, sure. So I live a mile away. So I just remote viewed the house. Well, it wouldn't matter how far away he lived. I could still remote view the house.
Right.
And there's this 7-year-old little girl there, and she's sticking these etheric pins in my grandson's arm, and he's just screaming and screaming in pain. And I said, "Hello, how are you?" And she says, "Oh my gosh, you can see me. You can see me." I said, "How did you get here?" And she said, "Oh, I followed his sister home because my granddaughter is in school and Jack is they're 8 years apart."
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, "You followed her home?" She said, "I just followed her home. I follow somebody different home every night." And I said, "Well, where's your mommy?" And she said, "Well, I visit mommy sometimes, but mommy just sits and cries. She just cries and cries, and mommy won't talk to me. Why won't my mommy talk to me?" She's really angry.
Mm-hmm.
And the energy of anger can transcend dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we saw in the movie Ghost as well.
Mm-hmm.
And because it transcends dimensions, you can feel that anger from someone who died. So I said, "Sweetie, this little girl has no idea that she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
She's clueless.
Mm-hmm.
She just thinks everybody's being rude
Mm-hmm.
or mean to her."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Sweetie, what's the last thing you remember?" She said, "Well, I was swinging." I said, "Okay." She said, "I was swinging so high." And I said, "And did you let go of the swing?" And she said, "Yes, I let go and I was going to be a bird." And then the next thing I remember, I was standing next to mommy and mommy was crying. So then I had to explain to her that she died. I said, "Sweetie, you died. And that means that you can't come back and be your mommy's little girl anymore. Your mommy can't see you." And as I'm explaining this to her, I made a request for a child angel to come in and hold her hand. I don't remember her name. To hold her hand and to comfort her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had them put a kind of a warm blanket around her. And she calmed down and she said, "So mommy can't see me?" And I said, "No, honey, mommy can't see you. And mommy can't hear you. But we're going to send you to that beautiful light with this nice angel so you have a playmate and you're not by yourself." She said, "Okay. So I don't get to go home." I said, "No, honey, you don't get to go home. It's time. It's time to cross over now." So she and this little angel skipped across this light bridge and they were gone. And Jack stopped crying and went to sleep. And it's a very poignant thing to have to tell someone that they died. I had to do that many, many times. A lot of people have no idea they're dead. And then when they find out they're dead, then they're really upset. Really, really upset. And I can give you another story. My brother was a contract negotiator for the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
And he dealt with all kinds of producers and directors and all these different people. And he called me frantically one night and he said, "Oh my gosh, a friend of mine who's a producer at Paramount was in a car accident and somebody called me and they said she died at the scene." And he said, "And I can feel her," because my brother was pretty psychic too.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you gotta locate her and cross her over." So because my brother was my connection, I just followed. We have what are called Akka cords that connect us to people and places and things. So I followed the Akka cord to her. And there she was standing by the side of the road. And she's looking at her wrecked car because something happened to her Mercedes. She pulled off and she was hit by a car when she got out of the car. She must not have looked. I don't know what was. She was probably on the phone and wasn't paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "My car's wrecked. There's a cop here. I don't know why this officer's not talking to me." She said, "Who are you? Why can you see me?" I said, "Well, I've come to help you." And she said, "Well, I need to get a hold of my husband, but for some reason my phone won't work. Do you have a phone I can borrow?" I said, "No, I don't have a phone you can borrow." And I said, "I have to tell you that you didn't make it and that you died at the scene and that that's why your phone doesn't work and the cop can't hear you." And she said, "Oh my gosh, you don't understand. I can't be dead. I have a birthday party for my little girl on Saturday. I have a meeting with all these producers, Paramount next week. I'm having my nails done tomorrow. I cannot be dead. So I hate to be the one to break this to you, but you died in this accident and it's over. There's no birthday party. There's no meeting, and you're not going to get your nails done tomorrow. And I brought an angel in for her, and I put a blanket around her, and I said, and this nice angel is going to cross you over, and I'm so very sorry. She said, but I had so much I wanted to do. I can't be dead. You don't understand. I can't be dead. I said, you are dead. You have died, and I'm here to provide the transition assistance for you. And the problem is she would still be standing there, because once you've died, time stops for you. The karmic clock doesn't stop because you're still incurring karma, because the person's subconscious sees a ghost standing there, but they're not really sure. That's why there are so many accidents at an intersection that has an accident. You'll see that same accident happen over and over and over, because all those ghosts are standing there trying to get somebody to pay attention to them. So if I see that, I cross them all over so I can cut down the number of accidents at intersections. And so helping people to cross over is incredibly important. Some parents want to stay and be with their children, but part of the lesson of death is letting go of attachment. We hold on to the dead. We don't want to let them go, especially if it's a child. We don't want to let that child go.
Right. Yeah.
But grief is a schoolhouse of experiences, of feelings and emotions you wish you never had to know. But no one can possibly go through mortal life without experiencing grief and coming to terms with the lessons that it offers. So that's my kind of dissertation.
Yes, really. Yes. I guess I never really thought about people not realizing they were dead or not wanting to go. Because to me, it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to a better place. Well, that's just my viewpoint about it.
Yes, and that's a wonderful viewpoint to have. But I've crossed over an awful lot of very, very, I hate to say it, Christian people who led a really good life. They were good Christians, like my former brother-in-law. He is, to me, the epitome of what makes a Christian. He lives his faith every day. He's the kindest, sweetest, most ethical man you'd ever want to meet. He's just a prince of a human being. But I have crossed over so many true Christians, truly, really good people who went to church 4 times a week and twice on Sunday, and were told that they were born in sin and died in sin, and God couldn't love them. And they tell me, God couldn't love me. I had a client who came and said, my mother-in-law's here and she won't leave. And I said, well, let's cross her over. And she said, we have to do that because she just won't leave. And when we talked to her, she said, well, I was born in sin. I'm not good enough for God. I'm not good enough for heaven. God could not love me. And I thought, what was the point of all of the good works that you did on earth? All the people you helped, that you were kind to, the tough days you had that you managed really well. When do you get absolved of all this sin and start feeling the blessings? I mean, Christ's message was joy, not guilt. The perpetual guilt trip keeps many a soul lost in the 4th dimension. Once I cross them over and they feel the light, there's no way I can tangibly describe what that light feels like, but I will make a humble attempt. When you see this light, there's this golden, almost a honey warm feeling that envelops the soul, and their pain, their disability, their fear, their depression. I've crossed over an untold number of suicides. It just starts to just slip away from them, like peeling the layers of all of this pain off. Mm-hmm. And the light just seems to just warm and wrap them in this beautiful blanket of hope and light, and above all, love. When they feel that, it's as if their heart, maybe it was undernourished, and starts to grow. And this light starts inside of them and meshes with the light of the divine. Mm-hmm. And then you don't see them anymore. And there's something so beautiful, and you have to steel yourself because it's so welcoming. You would like to join them, but it's not your time. Your time is to wait. So that's what happens.
So how did you get into, or maybe you always had the psychic ability and you just developed it, but how did it develop for you?
Well, like a lot of children, I thought everyone could see what I could see. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say I was a super psychic child. That's not true. I saw the ghost of my cat, and I could do a few little remote viewing things, but I thought everybody could do those things. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But my ability did not begin to fully take shape until I was married. I had some incidences, and I traveled when I was in college. I lived in Central America. I lived in South America. And several times this voice would say, do this or do that, and save my life, over and over. So I knew I had some connection to something on another level. When I married my husband, it's like the floodgates opened. All kinds of things started to happen. And I have known my husband in past lives. We've been together life after life, and one of us always died in those lives. This is the first life we've had a whole life, and it will be married 50 years in October.
Wow.
And most psychics don't have long marriages. Mm-hmm. So I consider my husband remarkable, that he has fully embraced what I can do, because I've saved his life repeatedly. Mm-hmm. Just because I could see things and warn him. And just because you can see something and you warn someone doesn't mean it always works out. But in many cases with my husband, it certainly has. Mm-hmm. So things just began to develop, and then I began to hear a ghost or sense a ghost. And we were stationed in Italy for 3 years when we were first married. I'm a retired naval officer. Mm-hmm. And I spent 20 years in the Navy. And we began to just have a lot of different incidences, and I could see things coming for him. And it just began to accelerate. And where I was stationed, I was at a NATO building, which used to be Nazi headquarters in Naples, Italy. Oh. So the buildings were built by the Nazis. And there were several women officers who were attached to this Naval Communication Area Master Station. Mm-hmm. We did the broadcast, the radio broadcast for all the ships in the Mediterranean, including all the NATO ships. It was Naval Communication Area Master Station. And what a master station does is it has these massive amounts of equipment and satellites that provide communication between and among all the ships, American and all the NATO vessels in the Mediterranean. Oh, okay. Submarines, surface ships, aircraft carriers, destroyers. And we, share that broadcast. And there's a master station in Norfolk, Virginia, and there's one in San Diego. And we have a few, and they're called master stations because they have this huge, it's called the broadcast. And it was really sophisticated at the time. And we had a big antenna on Mount Camaldoli in Italy. So, but we were using NATO buildings, and they were built by the Nazis. And I began to understand something called predecessor energy. And when you have a building that was built by people whose sole mission is the murder and the takeover and control of other human beings, that energy is really toxic. And so if you had the duty at night, you could hear people moaning and screaming at night, and there's nobody there. but you can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So at first you doubt yourself.
Right.
And then a few of us got brave and we said, when you have the duty, do you ever hear anything? And they go, oh my God, that building is so haunted. So I wasn't the only one, officer after officer, men and women said, it's terrifying to be in that building at night. And nobody wants to be alone because you can hear people screaming. You can hear the heavy footsteps and the thuds. And we know there's nobody there, but we don't know what's happening. So, okay, so there were ghosts in the building. But in 1976, I had no idea how to cross over a ghost. It took me years to figure that out. Long time.
Is there any way that you could clear the building?
I could do it now, but I don't have jurisdiction.
Right.
There are certain, I have to because of the level of ability that I currently have, I have to abide by spiritual law to the letter. So I can't just decide I'm going to clear your studio. I have to say, Lucinda, may I clear your studio? Is that something you would like? And then your permission is for one time. I can't just come back and remote view your home or your office or anytime I want. Basically, it's spiritual breaking and entering. So I don't have jurisdiction for that. When we left Italy, we moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and everything in Charleston's haunted, from Revolutionary War and slavery and Civil War and, oh my gosh, wall-to-wall ghosts. And the 18-month-old house we purchased was new. It was 18 months old, and it was profoundly haunted. Again, predecessor energy. It was the site of the old Ashley plantation that was built in 1600. And the entire neighborhood was haunted. It was so astounding that, and you think you're the only one, so you don't want to be crazy. I'm a naval officer. I'm a lieutenant.
Right.
This can't be happening. I talked to my neighbor and she said, oh, my house is so haunted. You just won't believe the things that are happening. And I said, mine is too. So we started comparing notes. She said, I'm going to go to the garden club. She comes back from the garden club for where we lived, the whole neighborhood. And it was house after house after house, had story after story after story. One woman would come downstairs and all her furniture would be completely rearranged every morning. She moved. Another woman would come downstairs and a rocking chair would be rocking in front of a blank wall where obviously there was a window in another house. It was near the Ashley River in East Charleston, in western part of Charleston. So we realized that there were so many, we're dealing with the ghosts of the past. We didn't know if they were slaves or we didn't know if they were, the supervisors or the people who lived in the house. The ruins of the plantation were just a block from us.
Oh, yeah.
And the original Avenue of the Oaks that were planted for this whole area were 400-year-old trees that were still there.
Oh, wow.
They carry the energy of the past. It was so fascinating. So then that's when a lot of this ability started. But I didn't know how to cross the ghost that was haunting us and driving us stark raving mad. I didn't know how to cross him over then. So it took a long time to develop the ability to manage that. Yeah.
I guess that's a lifelong, we all have, I guess, our lifelong purpose in life, and it doesn't develop overnight. It's just one little step at a time.
Well, I think that's a really important point, because just because someone is psychic doesn't mean that they have all of the abilities they're ever going to have at one moment. And some abilities come and go. I used to have the ability where I could see things happening in the future. I could predict, and my accuracy was stunning. And that went along for a while. And then all of a sudden what happened was I could see this in the future, and then something changed and it wasn't there anymore. And then the ability stopped. And then a new one came. I got another ability. And most of the others I pretty much kept. but it's like animal telepathy.
Mm-hmm.
On some unusual occasions, I can hear the thoughts of an animal,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't hear them every day.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some psychics who are animal telepaths, and they hear everything, including fish. That would make me nuts. So, and as you go along, sometimes if you're following spiritual law and you are seeking to do service,
mm-hmm.
you are able to have more abilities evolve over time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people who start out really psychic, they've been developing those same abilities over time.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a doctor or, a math wizard or a music genius or an artist.
Right. Yes.
You have life after life of building a skill set. And in some lives, you get to really, really put it to the best use.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. I love that. Well, even within the one lifetime like the lifetime that we're living right now, you're still developing skills and, yeah. I mean, it's all I guess it's cumulative. It's all cumulative.
Well, we would like to think that we're evolving. That's why I wrote a book on soul evolution. Are we evolving as souls or not? What does that look and feel like? So it's called soul evolution, past lives and karmic ties, because the karmic you create in one life is going to be returned to you in the next life. I had this one psychic lady said, for $600, I can erase all of your karma. And I said, no one can erase your karma. Christ could not erase your karma.
Mm-mm.
He might have mitigated something in an individual basis, but it's yours alone. And why would you want someone to erase your karma? She said, I can erase all of it. And I said, so if you were this wonderful, giving, kind person in one life, would you want that karma erased? And in the next life, you get to have more opportunities to be loving and giving and to be loved and to be embraced for who you are. Why would you want someone to erase that? And that concept never occurred to her because people think karma is just some punishment to be visited upon you. But that also includes the blessings that are rewards for so many good things that people do. Most people on the planet are really good people.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I love that. So how do you find the people who need help? Let's say it that way. How do you find the people who need help?
Through podcasts like this. I have a website called Ghost Helpers with an S, ghosthelpers.com. And under that, contact at ghosthelpers.com reaches me. And I have people from all over the world write to me. And they say, I think I have a ghost. And what I generally tell them is on ghosthelpers.com, there are several prayers. The primary prayer is the crossing over prayer. And the crossing over prayer is designed for any person to use it. Where you should not have to pay a medium to help your loved one. You should be able to do this yourself. I really feel strongly about that. So the crossing over prayer is free on ghosthelpers.com. There's also a crossing over prayer for suicide, for murder, for a beloved animal. And there are links to my books. I have 8 books out. There's a crossing over prayer book with 88 prayers that help the living and the dead. And it's also an audio book. So for people who are not comfortable saying prayers, and there are many people who have been very turned off by organized religion, it's hard for them to say a prayer. So out of respect for that, the Crossing Over Prayer book is an audio book. They simply play the prayers several times. That enables them to cross their loved one over. And I tell them, you can purchase the book, which is so much cheaper than hiring me.
Right.
You can get it for free on the website as a public service, a spiritual service. And then if you've done all that and you still want me to help you, then send me an email and we'll set up a time. And then we'll find out what you really need and help you. And I would say 90% of the time, people are able to do it themselves and they don't need me, and it frees me to keep writing.
Yes.
So that's how I work. And I don't do this for the money.
Right.
I mean, I do charge for my services. I want to be really clear about that because it replaces my energy.
Right.
It takes a lot of energy to do it if you're doing multiple things. And I clear people's homes. I did a house in Folsom and Lake Tahoe and Thousand Oaks. I'm doing a house in Williamsburg right now with a lot of Revolutionary War dead. Some things happened on this woman's property, which is why it feels so bad in the house. So, so somebody has a specific request, then I help people with feng shui and things like that. So that's how I do it. And some people feel like they're haunted emotionally, maybe by someone who's stalking them or someone they have a lot of different perceptions. And I work with people in many different countries. So that's how I work.
Yeah. I love the idea of giving the people the option to do it themselves, because that's kind of empowering.
That's the whole point. I had a guy in Austria say, I'm just convinced there's a lot of dead here. And I said, then please use this prayer and just say it over and over. And the prayer was written in 2012 for a funny reason. I dropped my iPhone and I had an appointment at the Apple store, and across the way at the shopping mall was a super high-end handbag store. So I wandered in the store because I was early. And my first ghost story book had just come out. I wrote Ghost Stories from the Ghost Point of View. There's 3 volumes. And I was talking to the ladies about the book, and they said, oh my gosh, the store is so haunted. And I said, it is? And they said, oh my gosh, yeah, it is. Can you clear the store? And I said, sure. And there were some homeless people who were there, and there were some women who were in an accident, and they basically shopped till they dropped, and they came back and they were still shopping. And that's why the people could see racks moving and the boxes were falling in the back. They were still shopping. And then the homeless people were watching the ghosts and the living people. It was a mess. So I cleared the place. I said, call me and let me know if you need anything else. They were okay for about 4 or 5 days. And then they called back and they said, we still have some more. And I said, you know what? I can't do this for people forever. There needs to be something that is empowering. So you shouldn't need me. So I wrote the crossing over prayer, and they beta tested it in the store, and they didn't have any more ghosts. And then I had people in different parts of the world tested. And one man took the crossing over prayer to the battlefields in Belgium. There were a lot of battlefields and graveyards, and there are not as many ghosts in graveyards. There's really where they fell or where they died. There are not as many in graveyards. And he would he would say the prayer. He'd just say it over and over and over as he walked the fields. And he heard these little thank yous and the tugs on his clothes and he said he felt so much movement, and it was so emotionally gratifying. He was really moved by it. So we know that it works. It's been used and used and used, and we've had so many different validations that some of the validations were really chilling that happened. And I mean, if we have enough time, I can share that particular story.
Oh yeah, we have 40 minutes.
Oh, okay. I had a woman from upper state New York contact me, and she said, my father was a murderer. He was executed as a murderer by the state of New York when they still did executions. And he's haunting me. And he was a horrible man in life, and he's a horrible man in death. And he keeps telling me to murder my little girl. She's 4. And he tells me this day after day after day after day. And I need you to just remove him. I want you to just remove you in my place and remove him. And I said, I'll be glad to do that for you, but how much more powerful would it be if you did it for yourself and you took your power back from this man? He said, well, I don't know if I could do it. And I said, well, what's the worst that could happen? If you do this, you prove to yourself that in this moment you have power over him, it's going to change your life on a lot of subtle levels. So she said, all right, I'll try. And I said, I want you to say this prayer 3 times in a very loud, authoritative voice, and then see what happens. So she did it over, I think she did it 4 or 5 times. And finally, her little girl looks up at her and says, Mommy, the bad man is gone now. Because her daughter could hear what her grandfather was saying.
Oh.
She could hear her grandfather saying to her mother, kill her, kill her, kill her.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the bad man is gone now. So she had it validated. She was so excited to tell me this. She said, I did it. I got him out of my life. And I said, right. And you didn't judge him. You didn't punish him. You crossed him over. My Father's house are many mansions.
Mm-hmm.
His karma will determine where he goes in these realms.
Mm-hmm.
Blessedly, that's beyond my pay grade. I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that part.
Really? Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It's hard to know why people do what they do, what their purpose is sometimes when they are in life, and then maybe they have a hard time giving that up. So like somebody who's really narcissistic or sociopathic or something, what is the purpose of that? But there must be something either they're trying to learn or the people around them also are trying to learn in this lifetime. And then I'm wondering if that's hard to give up once they die.
Of course, it's hard to give up. It's about power.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And people don't want to give up power. We're certainly seeing that in these times. So if you had a lot of power in life, you're not going to want to give that up in death. So you're going to want to go and continue to exercise that. I had a client, I had worked with her brother and helped her brother repeatedly and with very good results. And so he said, you really need to call this lady. She can help you. Mm-hmm. Well, apparently their mother died, and the mother was haunting the daughter. Oh. The daughter's in her 50s or 60s. Uh-huh. And her mother had been dead 10 years, and she haunted this woman every single day of those 10 years. Hmm. She hadn't had a full night's sleep in 10 years. And she had my business card for a year before she called me. Mm-hmm. And her story is in Ghost Stories from the Ghost Point of View. I think it's volume 1. There's 3 volumes. And she was a real piece of work, this mom. And I found her and reviewed the house, cleared the house, found the ghost, the mom. Mm-hmm. And she said, I control her. She is too stupid to make her decisions. I have to control her. And it's so great. I don't have to sleep anymore, and I can tell her what to do. I can control every movement and every moment of her life. And I said, but she's over 50. When does she grow up? And she says, well, she needs me to control everything in her life. I said, so you're the one who told her not to call me? She said, yeah. Took me a long, I've been working really hard to make sure she didn't call you. I said, okay, well, we're here now, and it's time for you to cross over. And it's like she's this 5-year-old spoiled brat. She goes, I'm not crossing over. There's nothing you can do about it. Chuckling. It's like, she says, I have my say-so. And I said, well, unfortunately, my say-so trumps yours. So I brought in a big angel, stood beside her. And I said, do you feel how nice that light is? And she said, well, yes. And I said, do you see over that light bridge? Do you see anybody you know? And she said, oh, there's my mama and my grandma and my auntie. And I said, well, I think they're waiting for you. Okay, bye. She was gone. She was just, the angel kind of smiled at me and crossed over. And my client called me and she said, I've had the first night's sleep I've had in 10 years, and my house is quiet. I'm alone in my house. I can think. I can rest. She couldn't believe the difference. And that took place before I wrote the crossing over prayer. So that's what happens. It's very, very interesting what happens for people when you do cross them over. I have a client in Folsom, California, and they are using the crossing over prayer because they are not very far away from Folsom Prison. Well, inmates die in prison.
Right.
When you look at the complexity of all the different ways people die, the personalities, the kinds of people who die, every single person's death experience and after their death experience is unique to that soul. I hear psychics say, oh, well, they all have unfinished business. Well, maybe, but you can't label everyone with that same label.
Right.
Everybody's death experience is different. And so what we've been able to do is her psychic children. So her psychic children are no longer bothered by these inmates. So they now have the power to cross them over, because you shouldn't have to pay me all the time to do it.
Right.
You should be able to do it yourself. And you should be able to teach your children how to use their psychic ability for the service of the living and the dead.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you're teaching people how to do it themselves.
Yeah. I had a guy from Austria say, I really think you should do this. And I said, well, please try this first.
Right.
He did not call back.
Right.
Now, one of the other points that I would like to share is that some people who die, like that producer who was she was instantly grieving that she discovered, oh my gosh, I'm really dead. All these things are never going to happen. There's a concept that was really astonishing for me when I discovered this, and it is that the dead grieve. They, especially if they died really early. And I've had this happen so many times. Somebody's, they got hit by a car, they were crossing the road. They don't know they're dead. Or they do know they're dead and they're looking down and they're seeing this. And it's like, oh my gosh, if I just look where I was going, or I can't believe this happened to me. And they hang around the living and they try to explain to the living how sorry they are. And they're grieving and grieving. This is so true for people who take their own life. I'm so sorry. So they're all hanging around the living. So a living person they're reeling from the shock of the event of that person's death, whatever the method. And now they're grieving, and they can't separate their grief from the person who died's grief. Because they can't make that separation, their grief is magnified. When you cross the soul over, you are free to deal with just your grief, which is already a lot.
Right. Yeah.
And it enables you to begin to release attachment. There was a woman in South Africa who was in very bad shape, and when I had a business partner, we were helping her, and she had 17 family members take their own lives.
Oh my goodness.
And people think suicide is contagious or hereditary. I am going to offer a theory that what if it's not hereditary or contagious? It's just that the suicide is so guilty, they don't cross over. And they're hanging around, and you become in resonance with suicide. And this client had suicidal ideation. So in crossing over 17 family members, all of a sudden, this room full of ghosts is gone. It's like someone turns the lights on in your life.
Yeah.
Well, she stopped wanting to take her own life. It just vanished.
Right.
She got married. Her business began to blossom. You can't have that much death energy surround you. Now, a lot of people whose children die don't want to cross them over. I want to keep my child close to me. thinking that if they cross over, that they'll never have contact with that child again. And I would like to offer that. And again, I appreciate your time and allowing me to share this. If you cross your child over, your child receives healing and love, so much love, and help on every conceivable level. They're not lost and alone and afraid and looking for some adult to tell them where to go and what to do. And they're not lonely anymore. They're surrounded by the light of God, of the divine. And you're free to grieve in as normal way as grief is, because grieving is hard work and it's part of a living process. And your child's love for you and your love for your child is just as strong, maybe stronger, because you crossed the child over. And there's another little factor. It's the gratitude that the dead have for the living for showing them this phenomenal light. Thank you so much for freeing me from this darkness. Makes a huge, huge difference.
Oh, wow. I love that. Do you have any last thoughts?
My last thoughts are, even if someone is afraid of ghosts, even if they think they can't do this, sometimes courage is action in the face of your greatest fear, or the most profound longing of your heart. And when you do this with courage, it can make the difference for 1,000 years for that soul. And I've written 8 books. I'm working on a 9th. Written 8 books. They're all on ghosthelpers.com. If you need to reach me, contact at ghosthelpers.com reaches me. And I cannot thank you enough for having me on your show. I deeply appreciate it.
Oh, I am so happy too. You never know who is going to be listening, who's going to need the message that you have to share.
Well, thank you. I agree. And we all have a contribution to make, and your willingness to have me on your show may change someone's life, because they got to hear this, and the questions you ask are really helpful. And I'm always, always grateful. I love doing these shows. So,
I think I saw you on another podcast. I can't remember who. It was someone that I was a guest. I was their guest, and I went and looked at some of their shows, and I think you were one of the guests
probably
that I listened to. I don't remember who it was. It was probably a couple of years ago now, but so yes, I'm happy that you were willing to do this with me. So thank you very much.
You are very, very welcome.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a rating and/or review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. I invite you to join my Patreon community at patreon.com/storypower, all one word. Or if you like, you can subscribe to Story Power on Apple Podcasts. It's my aim to build a community where we discuss the stories we love and talk about what we learned from them. I offer extra audio content and story suggestions to my patrons on both platforms. Remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Let's spread the story love. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.